Welcome back. You're watching Morning Live. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Now, the Creative and Cultural Industries Federation of South Africa's Interim Committee for the formation of the Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa will host a groundbreaking elective conference on the 23rd and the 24th of March. That's this year. This is to ensure that the arts sector speaks under one voice, as is the case with the Sports Federation, SASCOC. Now, to help us unpack, we're joined by critically acclaimed actor, author, arts activist. Well, he's well known. Everybody knows him. Eric Myeni. He's here in his capacity as CCIFSA Interim Committee member. Eric, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Let's put us in the picture very quickly for a lot of people that would have heard CCIFSA for the very first time. Quickly, just a bit of background on the federation.
Okay. President Zuma, some years back now, went to the creative and cultural industries and sort of had an indaba, like asked people what government can do for them and how. And what he picked up at the time was that the creative and cultural industries were incredibly fragmented, which meant their voices wasn't properly heard within government structures. He then spoke with then Minister of Arts and Culture, Mashatile, to look at how this can be solved. The minister then put together the Interim Committee, which is us, about 30-odd people, to then come up with how this could be done. How could the creative and cultural industries be represented in government? And that's how the idea for CCIFSA got hatched, which is the Creative and Cultural Industries Federation of South Africa, which is now going to be like SASCOC, which represents sporting codes in government. This will do the same for creative and cultural practitioners.
I can only imagine that it must be a mammoth task because there are so many different voices, so many different issues, so many issues speaking at different levels, whether it's national, provincial, community. To be able to get them all to have a groundbreaking elective conference means that we are all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yes, we should be. But the way we've looked at it is that there are over 300 organizations that, in one way or the other, say they are working in this space and helping people. There are individuals who've never been represented by anybody who are working in this area. So the question was, how do we get everybody to work together? How do we get everybody to sing, as it were, from the same book? And I think it was an elegant solution that the Interim Committee came up with, and that was to go by code, by sector, so to speak. So there are about 6 main sectors, which are then divided into subsectors. So what will happen at the conference is that all 300 or more of the organizations that claim to work in creative and cultural space will send an individual each, their head or whoever they want. So all organizations are then represented. And then from each province, there will be at least 10 people from each creative and cultural sector. You can think about it: film, craft, theater, and so on. So there will be 10 from each sector that go to the conference. So that's 540 delegates immediately representing the different sectors in each province. And then we'll have 100 individuals who are strong in the provinces but are not represented anywhere. That takes it up to 940. When they get there, this is the beauty of it, they then get split into subsectors. So you don't represent your organization, you don't represent yourself, you represent your creative space, so to speak. So if a guy like me would have to split himself in half because he writes books and he makes films. But if I was, I would have to choose one and go to the film subsector or film sector and choose a subsector there. And in there we sit and we deal with the MOI.
That's the machinery.
Yes, that's how it's going to work. But as you can see, it unifies immediately around what is important to you. If you are dancers, whether you're in an organization or alone, you work as dancers.
I think you mentioned something interesting here because it's that unification of that voice, that message. How do we make sure, because I'm happy that you've broken that down for us, but every sector has got an issue that's of importance to that industry. How do we make sure that the one doesn't trump the other? Because as you also started this conversation, there's 6 main sectors.
And 36 subsectors.
Yeah, so how do we make sure that who gets priority?
Well, what happens is on the first day, the Interim Committee has already done a memorandum of incorporation, which means we have looked at all the subsectors, consulted with as many people in the sector as possible, been to every province to talk to people and created this memorandum of incorporation. At the conference, the first day will involve each subsector interrogating the memorandum of incorporation, which will be sent to them a week ahead of the conference. So when they get there, they say, as craft people, this is what we think should be changed, this is what we think would work best, and they get accommodated. As film people, this is what we think, this is what we need. And that gets put back into conference. The memorandum of incorporation then gets corrected, and when that's done, it's adopted. And when it's adopted, we move on to the next day, which is the election day. And that's where people are elected into the General Council, which will represent all the subsectors. Yeah. And from the General Council will be the President and Vice President and the 6 subsector heads to form the board, which will then, put together the office that will run CCIFSA for the rest of the time. Yeah.
Let's talk about the implication very quickly of the formation of CCIFSA, and what does that mean for the landscape going forward?
Number one, it means a very, very good unification. So if I'm in craft, I hang out with craft people and we look at our issues together and we feed it to CCIFSA. CCIFSA, or the General Council, which then feeds into the board, but it then feeds directly into government. Now, if you look at our sporting codes, they're so well organized, so well funded, so well looked after. It's because of SASCOC, because it speaks for each code at the highest level of authority, which is our parliament, after the constitution, of course. Yeah. So what that's going to happen is that what's going to happen with the creative and cultural sectors. They will have a real voice, a direct voice to impact policy, to impact all sorts of areas, legislation, and how they should be treated, how they should be paid, how they should be looked after, and all of that going forward.
10 seconds, quickly. How do we make sure, Eric, this is not another talk show?
Well, you go to www.cifsa.org.za, you make your voice heard, and it's like the way we make the government pay or do what it's supposed to do. Hey, your representative must be made to account every time.
And work for you. Okay, we're going to leave it there, but thank you very much for talking to me. That was critically acclaimed actor, author, and arts activist Eric Myeni, speaking to us in his capacity as the CCIFSA Interim Committee member. That's the Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa, and will host its groundbreaking elective conference that will be held on the 23rd and the 24th of March. Now, here at Morning Live, we like to give